Excellent. So let us now see if we can find ourselves. It's always a bit of a trauma. Oh, there we are. Cool. There we are. Excellent. Good. Let's swap that as for comments, and then I might be able to see what's going on. I can see that there are some people joining us. Good evening, Elizabeth. Hello, Connie. Let me just move that. Hi, Emrene. Welcome, 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 welcome. Right. Oh, that might need to go down even a little bit further. There we are, there we are, there we are. So, we have a plan. It's always good to have a plan, I think. Always good to remember. It's a beautiful day in the UK today, which is lovely. So my craft room has got the doors open at both ends for some ventilation, which is going to be uber important tonight, not just because of the temperature, but because of some of the products that I'm intending using. I've got a whole mountain of stuff around me, as ever, and I'm going to need that. So I have decided to do something a little bit different this evening, using some products that we don't see very often, but I love, and mixing them up with some of the new products. So we're going to make a little lantern from a glass pot. This one I picked up relatively cheaply, and we're going to have it with, so that we can have it with or without a light. So the first thing to do is going to be to warm up the label that's stuck on the bottom. Bonsoir, Michelle. Sorry about my appalling accent, because I was never any good at languages at all. Good evening, Sheila. Welcome. If anyone's in the UK, hopefully they are enjoying the garden rather than sat indoors. But then again, with mobile phones, you can watch everything out, and you can easily watch it outside. So heating up labels just makes it uber easy like that to remove them. It's far better than a fight. And of course, there wouldn't just be one label on the pot, would it? Why have one when two will do? Good evening, Sue. Hello, Sarah. Welcome, my darling. Thank you so much for watching this evening. I really do appreciate it, and for sharing everything out. Let's see if that has warmed that glue enough. You see, who knew? Oops, don't put that on your keyboard. Hello, Judith. Welcome, my darling. It's just so easy with that. Let me just grab a kitchen roll that's gone walkabouts. So we're going to be adding some layers of colour onto this glass, but I still want it to be transparent because I want to be able to pop lights in it and pop it out in the garden if I want to. So I've used that, but I just to make sure that I've got rid of all the sticky residue, I'm just going to give this a spritz, and I am using just some rubbing alcohol. You need a high purity, and the one from Pentacolor is 100% pure alcohol, and that will just de-sticky that. And I'm just going to do the bottom, so it's helpful. It's in a nice little spray bottle. It's one of the reasons why I felt I needed to have the doors wide open today, because and then so we now have a degreased surface, and as I say, I want this piece to be transparent, and I have had a play, so I do know that it works. So let me just grab blue, blackberry. These are colours that we don't see very often, or products that we don't see that often. There's the dilutant. So these are Pentacolor media inks. Let's get a clean bottle. Yeah, and there are lots and lots and lots of different colours of these. There are essentially an alcohol ink, so you know you can quite happily you substitute if you can't get them where you are. But and I just have a little sponge dauber here that I've popped a felt pad onto, which also makes life easy. That one is shut, so let me just, you probably ought to poke a hole in these rather than snipping an end off, but I don't have a pokey tool that's small enough at the moment. So we're just going to spend a bit of time layering up. So that is some dilutant. We'll pop the lid on because it will evaporate, and let's start out with media ink in blue. As I say, I've chosen well, there we are then. And you will just pop a few drops of that onto there. So these are 20ml chip bottles, and obviously are likely to go a long way. And to start with, it really won't look like I've got very much, she says. Actually, when you can see it, I think the light is in a favourable thing, and I'm just going to pop this on, and because it's reasonably warm, it's going to go a long way, but also dry quite quickly. And we're just going to literally minimal effort involved with this, and you can see from the few drops that I've added actually onto here that I've now got reasonable coverage. Yeah, my hands are going to look odd, but that's okay, and we're just going to do a little bit of layering. So the first one was balloon, and then we've blue, and this is lagoon blue. I'm going to just put a few drops onto there. There'll be enough dilutant on there. And then, so this is a much paler colour, and it's going to fill in the gaps. It will show in the finished piece. There we are. And I definitely know that you often need quite a lot of layering. And when I get fed up with just tapping it on, I'm actually just going to drip some bits of this directly onto here and spread them around. And we're going to go colour layering bit by bit by bit. Dripping them does cause me a degree of issue because it tends to run, but that's okay. We'll have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And we're going to just build up our colours, and you think you're never going to get there, but actually you will do. I promise you, you will eventually get there. Right. So we'll just pop these in and move it about. There we are. So that is the palest of them. Then we have a blackberry. And blackberry is a purple colour. Do we have purple in the sea? Possibly not. But hey ho. And we're going to mix and match, and we're going to go back and forth. And we will, bit by bit, just build our layers. I'm sorry about the fact that it's going to look like I've got mucky hands, but hey ho. And we'll come back to some of the blues eventually. And layer back over. It just takes a little bit of patience to just build up the depth of colour that you want, but believe it, you will get there, and the finished piece it will show. So we're going to have quite a lot of rinse and repeat this evening whilst we do this, but that's okay. We've got lots of different colours. There we are. I don't want to thin it out too much. There we are. But I definitely don't want it to look like I've got big blobs either. And these will carry on moving about, and that's also just fine whilst we just build up our layers and our definition. And this one is topaz. What have I got? Another one? I've got black. You see, I've got lots of colours over here, and Egyptian blue. Lots of, yeah, a big range of colours. So this is black, and you think, why am I using black? But actually, it's just going to add a bit of depth to the piece, to it overall. And it's a bluey, inky black, not a black, if that makes sense. Let's just chase that dribble around. But all of these layers, all of these adding, we'll go back to some of the blue, and we might, there we are. I've got lots of dots, lots of these in lots of different colours. There's a completely empty area there, so let's just pop that onto there. But as I say, it is just a question of building your colour layer by layer by layer. So I'm going to now pick a colour called Juniper Green. It's a colour I absolutely love. There we go. And it will get another layer of colour into the mix. There we are. And we will build. Let's say the art of this is definitely just being patient, not taking your, it's not difficult, easy techniques to do, but it just will make a big difference to the piece. I'll take my hand out of it in a minute. I'm wanting more of that green. I love the green in that. Yeah, and I'm going to go back, I think, to the, let's go back to the topaz blue, she says, with another one right there that, oh, there we are. Yeah, okay, so we'll add yet another shade of blue. So I'm going for colours that are vaguely reminiscent of the sea, but yeah, I know purple maybe not in the sea, but it'll just add, and just the tapping makes a big difference to the overall pieces. Yeah. And we're just building up some layers of interest, layers of colours along the way, added depth. The colours will mix, but so you do need to be mindful that you don't use colours that will make mud. So these are all tonally on the blue spectrum. I've got a big area there that I appear to have completely ignored, but that's okay. Let's just pop a bit more there, and then we're going to go back. Good evening, Julie. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Juliana. Good evening, Judith. I hope I haven't missed too many people. So let's just add back in some of this. Wasn't the one I wanted. Let's just go back in and add some of this lagoon into here. So if I pop that on to this surface, you can see that actually I'm now building up quite a nice depth of colour, just simply by tapping and adding in the colours. she says. Oh, and then you can carry on just building your layers, building your colours as much or as little as you want, really. There we are. Just make sure I've got a reasonable amount around the top and the bottom. There we are. So we've got, oh, let me just pop that down, lid these and pop these out of the way, because otherwise we'll have an icky sticky ucky mess on here. I might add a bit more black, she says. Maybe not. Okay, so let me just pop into here a piece of kitchen towel. There we are. So I think there we are. So just by that tapping motion with the different colours, I've just built up a layer of colour. Do, as I say, they are alcohol inks, so the media inks, so do just make sure that you have a well ventilated room. Yeah. Now obviously if I put a waterproof a solvent-based product on these, I'm going to wipe it all off, so I obviously can't do that. I just need to give those a little bit of a blast dry, so that it's properly dried on here. It's not going to take very long, but I just want to give it that extra little blast because I'm on air, and then we can do, we're going to, I was asked recently what are my favourite Pentacolor crackles, and of course that's an impossible one to answer. You might all know, and some of you might be screaming at the screen. So my answer was the fine line crackle, which I'm not going to use because it doesn't like water, so it's definitely a solventy based one, and the transparent crackle, or transparent cracking gel, which, ladies, will be coming to the new retailers. Pentacolor have changed their website recently, and for whatever reasons it didn't appear on the new website, but they haven't discontinued it, much to my relief. Much to my relief. Right, that's softer brush. So the cracking gel comes as a one component and a second component. So it's one of the two component crackles, and we're just going to put a good layer of this part one, which is a water-based product, so it isn't going to move my piece here on here, and we're just going to lift this up and paint a coat of here reasonably evenly. All over, and I'm rather hoping it won't take a silly amount of time to dry, because take it off that rim, because there's a draft in my room, and also that's because we've got the windows and the doors open because it's beautifully warm in the UK. I know, who would ever know? Now, of course, you could do the bottom, but I'm not going to. For the purposes of here, we're just going to carry on, and we're just going to give this a nice layer of that. Make sure we have it all covered. Because it's a water-based product, of course, this makes for easy cleanup. There we are. Let's just make that, pop that over there. Make sure we've got it over everywhere, because we'll notice if we don't. And let's just have a little cleanup of the mess in the areas that I don't want that to be. There we are. There we are. Okay. So she says, having missed a piece completely, because I can see I've missed a piece completely. Let me just, yeah, because there's nothing like missing a piece completely, is that? Really, there isn't. All right. Maybe this is drying very quickly. Anyway, that can go into that. There we are. Okay, okay. So that can go there, that can go there, that can sit there to dry. And then we've got some extra bits. So this comes with a lid. So if you, which I guess is quite useful for stopping you losing your tea lights when you go walkabouts. So we're going to have a little bit of a play. Just need that. So I am using, relatively unusually for me, Pentacolor modelling paste light for this manoeuvre. And I have a kitchen fork, because everyone needs a kitchen fork in their craft room. So let's just pop a layer of the modelling paste light. And you could just leave it at this and stick some found shells on, but we're going to do a different technique, one that my good friend Vasilis has shown a while ago. But, you know, you can't expect us to be shown a technique and then it not appear. And you, to be used, he hasn't. There we are. But I will credit, and I'm sure he might have learnt it from somewhere else. So we've got that there. Let me just clean the bottom of that because it's going to go every which way. There we are. Okay, okay. So we're going to take our fork and run it straight down and create a few lines. Get rid of the extra. And we're just going to take that down the side of that. And then we're just going to scratch. Go up and down and make it all irregular. So we're going to create some texture along the way. There we are. Lots of lines on there. Lots of texture. We're going to wipe that. And then we're going to pop that to the side. We will be coming back to it. So there we are. So we've now got two pieces drying. She says. And we can take a heat gun to those if we need to, but we've got a little bit more to do, so that's okay. So I've taken the fish mould from the recent Stamperia release, and I have cast, I've actually used air dry clay for this rather than resin, but I could have used the rapid resin because it's very mouldable. But I've used an air dry clay because these stay soft and mouldable. And all I did, this is actually a smaller vase, but I've popped it onto a glass thing so that it's dried in a curved shape. And I had to tape it down. Now, air dry clay is very porous. And so I have sealed these pieces with some decor varnish in that, but any varnish will work. And I have to say, I have a couple. This piece is actually cast from resin, but here we are. So let us now pick up some paints off the floor, and we're going to keep with the bluey theme. And there we are. And we're just going to have a little bit of easy painting while some of these pieces are drying, because why not? We have to bring the sea theme in somewhere, don't we? So this one is called Heliobore. Don't ask me why it's Heliobore, because I don't think Heliobores are particularly blue, but anyway, it's a pretty blue. So I'm just pop. Oh, you can't see that, so I'm just popping some Heliobore out. So it's an acrylic paint mat in the colour Heliobore, and we have one of my favourites, country green. So we'll just put a big pile of that out, or a little pile of that out even. And I have some vintage blue on the side as well. So we'll pop some of that. So we're keeping with the blue tones. But you do you. If you want goldfish, pick from the orange and red spectrum of pieces, and that will work just absolutely beautifully fine. And then we've got another colour for dry brushing. Let's just pick up off the floor from their pouch some smaller brushes. There we are. And let's clear the deck so we don't have too much of a mess there. As I say, I've got some pieces drying, and that's inevitable when we're doing that. So wouldn't be a make for me, would it, without? So let's just take some of that soft country green. These are make-believe fish, so it don't really matter what we do. I'm not going for realistic. I'm just going for what colours that I like. So let's just pick up the fins. And I could pick up, I haven't got them out, but I might pick up a wax later on. But on the other hand, I might not. So there we are. So whilst the other pieces are drying, we've got that. So one of the things like with the alcohol inks is that you can put them into the inside surface of acrylic baubles. Will work nicely. And then add gilding flakes on the back of them to really make the colours pop. They do need something inside to make them pop, but they do pack a punch. There we are. So there we are. Let's have, so there are several different fish in this fish mould from Stamperia, from the Silent Sea collection. So I've gone for a tonal look today, because not quite monochrome, because I have added a green, but that's okay. Green is next to blue on the colour wheel, isn't it? So they will work quite nicely together. We're going for relatively simple activities. We will need to paint the back of these because they will be visible on the piece. So we'll do the front first, and then we'll add all in the same colour, I think. There we are. Just so it looks pretty. And we probably don't need all of them, but hey ho. So let's just do a custom mix of those two, the country green and the helioball. And then we can have some different coloured fish. There we are. And it is really quite warm in here. I can see that the step 1 on my glass file that I'm altering is absolutely drying. I've got patches that are already dry. So we'll see where we're up to, and we might end up partway through painting our fish. Partly because I don't particularly, if I take a heat gun to these, they will flatten out, which is fine, but defeats the purpose of having dried them around a curved surface if you then flatten them out. There we are. Let's just add there we are. And the out of character, but I really quite like it in the mould, is a puffer fish, both side on and front on. So here we have a side, the two puffer fish. Let's put him up the right way. Yeah. So let's just paint in the fin that's up there. We're not going to be anatomically correct, I'm sure, but that's okay. Let's just give that little eye a little bit of colour. And let's just do that tail. And then we'll tackle the other one. Right, so I'm thinking that the fins are all the way around the edges of these. I might be wrong, but there we are. So this flat one's actually going to go on the top of the lid. There we are. So, who else is there? Who have we got? Good evening, Jill. Hello, Vasilis. I'm borrowing one of your techniques tonight. I have already referenced you, my darling. The fact that I am using one of the techniques that you've taught me. It's relatively unusual for me to do that, but there we are. So let's just take this. So we're going to, let's just do that. And there we are. And then we'll come back and start layering some colours. So I've got a pot of water to the side. Let's just take a baby wipe. And then this is the vintage blue. So let's just add some vintage blue around here. There we are. On the top of our fish. There we are. And let's go for a paler colour underneath. So let's just pick up some of that country green. And they'll mix in the middle, and that's absolutely fine. I don't have any qualms about that. As you know, I tend to colour mix my projects as I go, because I think you get a more natural colour variation by doing that, and it just makes life much easier for my simple brain when it comes to painting. There we are. Now then, let's just do the head of our fish. The fin, I think, is now dry enough for me to do that. So let's just mix these two colours into here. I don't know quite what fish these are meant to be, but hey ho, we'll go with whatever. There we are. So let's just take this along the sensory line that all fish have, that tell them where, orientate them as to which is where they are, whether they're upright or whether they're not. I can see I've missed some of that fin, so we'll come back into there in a minute. There we are. Let's just wash that down a little bit. There we are. And of course that's now not dry, but hey ho. Let's just take some of that other blue. And we might just need a little bit more of the darker blue into there. So we're just going to have fish of assorted shades of blues and greens. Obviously, if you recognise the fish and want to paint it in an anatomical way, then, you know, be my absolute guest. Let's mix some of that vintage blue with some of that heliobore 57 colour, but there we are. And then we can put this in, and I can obviously add colour into the eye later on. That's also not a problem, and we'll add in some details along the way. There we are. Right, let's get this up the correct way. So we've got that custom colour mix. So let's just colour blend this one as we choose to into here. Sorry, I'm concentrating, so if anyone's commenting, I do apologise. I'm not deliberately ignoring you. We'll have a look up in a minute because we'll get to the point where we're going to need to get something out to dry, but that's okay. I have tried to keep the drying to a minimum tonight because there we are. Because quite frankly, it's too hot. I'm absolutely in a summer mood. It's beautiful, beautiful weather in the UK for this. Absolutely beautiful in the UK. Our summer holiday season tends to start in April or post Easter, and often our best weather is actually in May, early May. So it's fast approaching, isn't it? So let's just pick some of that. So these fish go in assorted directions. They definitely have a correct way up and an incorrect way up, but I guess fish can swim upside down if you want them to. Might not use all of these on it, but I have one that I have pre-done so that you can see where I'm going with the whole thing. And because if you're going to have picnics on the beach, you might actually just need more than one of these. Hi Stephanie, how are you, my darling? Are you still in your rehab facility, or have you managed to get enough mobility to be allowed to go home? There we are. Yeah, the weather here is absolutely beautiful at the moment. I think our warmest day is set to be Thursday, so it's cool. All right, I'm just going to get base layers of paint on these. We're not having to be fancy. We don't have to be precious. I am going to have to paint the back of them. So let's just pop that over. Oh, no, let's just not paint that. Put that over there. Let's just take this one and paint in the rest of our puffer fish. Lots of colours. Lots of things. There we are. Put that into there. We don't necessarily have to have it all out. We might need to grab another product, but hey ho, that's life. There we are. There we are. There we are. That will work for now. It will work for now. So let's just give these all a bit of a blast dry. So this is the pot that I coloured with the immediate mix, and that's got the step 1 of the cracking gel on it that went on white. I can see that most of it is clear, but the area that I put the extra on because I thought I'd missed is still there. So I just need that to become properly white, and I can, but I obviously don't want to heat the whole thing too much. There is the lid, which needs another layer on it. So, so I need that modelling paste to dry before I can tackle that. So there's inevitably a degree of requirement for drying, I'm afraid. I think it's just part of life. Good evening, Lorraine. Thank you for joining us, darling. The joy of having my fingers inside of the glass jar is I can feel when it's getting too hot and I need to move away because I can't hold the glass then. Let's let that cool down. And of course the step one will continue to dry as the heat goes out of the glassware. Let's just turn this round and tackle another area. So one of the nice things about the Pentacolor is, of course, they are all heat stable, which definitely does make life easier. Right, I'm just going to pop that over there. That's not quite ready for the next layer, but I can flick these pieces over. So whilst that's working there, let's just pick up that nice brush and turn these over. And it really isn't going to matter what colour we have on these. I just don't want them to be stark white because they can look like a shadow under the water on the glass jar, because the glass jar is going to maintain a transparency to it. There we are. So let's just paint the back of these. You don't very often see me painting the backs of things, but when you're going to have something that is three-dimensional and that you can look through, then you do need to remember to that the back of the clay pieces absolutely does need a little bit of a care and attention. If they're being hidden on a mould, it doesn't really matter. Flat on a canvas, it doesn't really matter, but these will not be. So it can help you use up some of those paints, which is also cool because I don't like waste, as we all know. There we are. Mix those colours in so they don't look completely flat and uninteresting. There we are. Pop that up that way. Let's take the heliobore as the dominant colour for here, but again it doesn't really matter because it's just going to give an impression when you look through the glass. There we are. As I say, it's not very often that you'll see me painting the backs of the pieces. Good evening, Maxine. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And we can take that heat gun out again in a minute. We're going to end up with some drying. Whatever I do, I'm going to end up with a pile of drying to do. I think it's just not. It's just going to be part of life for this one. There we are. Let's just pop that into here. That one won't matter because that's going flat. So let's just pop that over there, pop that there, and let's just grab these out of the way. They really won't take very long. This is the piece that's going to take a more difficult amount of time. So it's not completely dry, ladies, but it's going to be dry enough for me to do what I want to do at this stage. Let's just give that an extra blast to get rid of, to heat up that bit, because I've still got a bit of a white primer on that needs to dry. There we are. So let's us just take that modelling paste light again. It's great, it's thin, it's light, it will add texture to our pieces. It's like almost really soft buttercream. Let's just cover this lot, and you think, why? And you put all of that down and you covered it all up and you made all of that texture, and now you're covering it all up. I know. Yeah, because why wouldn't I know? There we are. So I now have another layer on there, and I'm just going to go in the opposite direction. Now this is definitely better done when that first layer is properly dry. It is, okay, because it's not properly dry. But actually I've still got quite a nice texture there, okay. But you pop it back and you get an unevenness of your texture. There we are. So that can go into there to wash, that can go over there. I have one of those pre-prepared, and I am going to drop that into there because it will stick in. There we are. But I have one that I have pre-prepared. So when that dries, and you've dried it properly in between each layer, you get all of that texture. I can see the layer beneath and I can see the layer on top. And this is just another moulded piece, yeah. So it just is beautiful. Good evening, Anna. Now then, and at this point, we're going to think possibly sand, possibly not. Just bear with while I just go and get the sand, because we have left it in the cupboard, well, in the box behind. Because we have a paint called Desert Sand, so we might as well use the paint called Desert Sand. So this is one of the new watercolour paints. There we are. Okay, let's just get rid of that. There, off there. Going to get rid of that thick layer. There's enough on there for me to paint with. I'll pop that onto there. Seal that down. No, oh, she says, having caught the bottom of that one. Okay. And find a nice brush. There we are. So we're just going to give this a little white coat. I did this earlier whilst the weather was dry. Yeah, whilst it was a bit warmer in here, and it's just going to give us a little bit of extra layer of detail. And so you don't have to, you know, if you don't want to have a lid for your pot, don't do it. But the lids I found, the pots I found in one of our local cheaper stores for a couple of quid came with lids. And I'm always needing storage. I don't know about you, but I definitely always need storage. So there we are. I wouldn't put food stuff in it long term, I have to say, but you know, crafty goodies. Little bits of flowers will work quite nicely. So we'll just add that into here. There we are. Turn that round and make sure we've got that covered. So when I was, if I was just going to paint the lids rather than adding the texture, I would suggest that you give the wood pieces a little bit of a sand first. So a little bit of sandpaper, and then wipe off the dust, so that you've got a surface that's keyed for adding in your your paints onto the, because I've used a paste underneath, it's not going to be a problem. There we are. Let's see if I've got some real depth in here that I haven't managed to get into, but that's okay. I'm going to highlight that. Anyway, there we are. So that will work. So that offending lump can go in the bin. That can go in there. And let's just have a little bit of a clean down because we have a mucky mess. And I don't particularly want to get paints into the wrong place. These paints where I don't want them. So let me just lift these up out of the way. Oh, sorry, ladies, I know that's not a pleasant sound. There we are. Clear that out of the way. Right, excellent. That's just, look at my hands. You know I'm live, don't you, when we end up with everything, with my hands covered in everything and anything. There we are. I don't want to pick up stuff with mucky hands because all I'm going to do is then transfer it where I don't want to. So let's just grab that heat gun again. The lid that I've put the paste on can sit over there out of harm's way. We've already got this one. Oops, don't want that big lump of paint in there. So that needs a proper dry. Those have had a proper dry, and I just need that big white blob that I've got on here out of the way and dried because I can't do the next bit until that's dry. It's my fault for popping a bigger area on than I should have done. But I would quite like the pot to look nice, so I'm going to take the time to get it all dry. And if I don't, actually, it could carry on drying post live, and it will eventually go clear. So don't worry about it. And if I get fed up and do just move on, because sometimes you just have to be realistic. To be fair, we are coming together quite nicely. So that's actually skinned over, so that will take a wee while. So we've alcohol media inked the base of here, this to get the colour and the texture and the variation, and then we've put the step 1 of the transparent cracking gel on, and then I have a step 2. So clearly labelled, which makes life easy. And let's just grab a softish brush. You can pop this on with a palette knife if you want to. That's also fine. Yeah, I'm just going to pop it on with a brush. I want a reasonably even layer. I'm not overly mithered about that. The thicker you put it on, what will happen is you'll get fewer cracks, but they will be deeper. And the thinner you put it on, you get more cracks, but they are surprisingly thinner. There we are. But I love this product because because I can colour it. I can add paint to it if I want to, and it will still behave and crackle. I can add pigment pastes, and there's collections in the new collections to it to colour it. So yeah, you can do lots and lots with it. So I know I'm taking a risk where that layer is not quite, where I haven't let it dry, but that's fine because we're on a live. We'll be here forever if we wait until that to fully dry. So there we are. Let's just smooth that out. And as I say, I know it will continue to crack to go paler anyway, because that's what happens with it. There we are. Doesn't matter too much about the size. Oh, she says that can go in that pot of water to the side, and let's just clean that bottom, because you need a clean bottom, don't you? And then let's just clean that top, pop that over there, and then lid that cracking gel, because otherwise it'll that can go over there. So there we are. So I know I said that I put varnish on my air dry clay before I painted them. It just means that the paint gets absorbed less, but I'm going to now add another layer of the matte varnish to these. To settle it down and just to protect the colour on the outside surface that will be ultimately picked up and handled. You can bring out the details ultimately with some wax, and that's also just fine. There we are. So let's just give this all a little bit. We will be taking some distressing stuff, because that's just part of life for me, isn't it? Wouldn't be a life for me if we didn't have some form of antiquing, distressing, layering of my colours. And as I say, I can, when everything's completely dry, I can add in the details for the eyes and the mouth and things with just wax, or a pen, because we all know that I quite often will use a pen for adding details into things. It just makes life easy, doesn't it? Backside doesn't matter so much, because it's going to ultimately be against the wall of the jar. There we are. These shape pieces do need to be covered. There we are. Let me just move back on to screen. I'm sitting way too back in my chair, I think. That's the problem this evening. There we are. Let's just add a layer of that stuff, the varnish over the top of that, just to protect it. Let's take off the excess, so we're not here for forever in a month of Sunday with that drying. Good evening, Yolanda. Thank you. There we are. Let's just do that. Let's just do that. And let's just wipe our sticky mitts and, horror of horrors, retrieve that heat gun again. But that's fine. Okay. So let's just pop that into the inside of there to heat it from the inside out rather than direct heat. And that will help to speed up that whilst we get this dry. So has anyone got any questions so far on what I have tried? Yeah. Okay. No, this is it's not feeling very well, Sarah. So I think she is she was having tea when I spoke to her earlier, and I suspect she's going to have an early night. Because she has had a sneaky peek at where I'm aiming for. So let's just get this varnish dry, because otherwise it defeats the purpose of putting the varnish on. The clay pieces are staying reasonably shaped, as you can see. One of the reasons I reverted to clay for these rather than lots of resin is some of the areas of these molds are really quite thick, and they set quite quickly, but the edge pieces are really quite thin and they take a lot longer to set. And the headache with that is that the central part wasn't that moldable when I was taking the resin out. It will work, but I was being very impatient, so just hence the decision to do things differently. So let's just put this into here. I can see that there are cracks beginning to form on my piece. I know you won't be able to, so that's okay. Put that out, that paint out the way, that can go out the way. She's hitting the camera. So I pick that up. I can see that I've got cracks forming here, but you really can't. I know you can't. So I should stop trying to convince you. You can see, you can probably see it there, where we are. So the cracks are in the line of the paste that I put on. There we are. Yeah. And that's the area where you won't see because I've still got wet primer underneath there, but that's okay. So that's definitely working. And just give this a jolly good blast. All around, and I can let it cool down a little bit. While I carry on with the other pieces, and it'll carry on cracking until it's all transparent. Ignore the big white blob because that's where I didn't let the primer dry, and I'm very much aware of that. So that is my bad, nothing to do with the product, but that was being done specifically because I don't want to be hit. So the camera's come over. Right, so these dried. So those are now dry. So let's start adding some interest. So I have the steel blue watercolor, it's just yumminess in a jar. It's coming over a bit darker than it actually is, but it's absolutely yummy in a jar. So let's just add some of that now onto. There's you can see that there's a transparency to this, and it is permanent once dry. There we are. So let me just put that over there. So, and then we can wipe off gently. Just lift it off. So we're adding just some extra details into our piece. There we are. Just helps. There we are. So let's just stick with the dark one. We could use some of the other colours, but I'm thinking the dark one is going to work better for me. I'm going to let it dry just a little bit before lifting that off. There is a balance to be had. There we are. I might regret having done that, but that's okay. As I say, once it's dry, it is permanent. So let's just clean our hands off that mucky mess. There we are. It's just going to help add in just a little bit, unify the colours a little bit, help to link it all in. There we are. There we are. Just makes such a huge difference. Adds in the texture, the depth. There we are. Let's just lift this piece up. So that's our puffer fish. It just allows you to see all of that detail. Right. Don't want to close that. Don't want to do that. And I will need that out. So let's just pop that into there. Ah, yucky, 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 sticky, mucky. And then we're going to do the same with the umbre. So this is an antique laser. So it's designed to make things look aged. Not that I'm not old enough as it is, but hey ho, there we are. So this is the watercolor laser antique and the colour umbre. And I'm going to push this into all of those layers of texture that I know I have in here. Oops, she says, popping her hand into the pot of paint of antiquing gel. There we are. Right, so that's just done half of that. So if we do that, let me just grab a clean, damp wipe. Okay. So we can see that I've got lots of texture in this, and if I just wipe that back now, all of that texture that I popped into there from that modelling paste is all coming nicely up to the surface or to become more visible. And it's just a nice technique when you've got lots of texture to do that. But as I say, don't let it dry completely, because if you do, you won't be able to take it off. There we are. There we are. Hi Zelda, well, Zeta even, welcome. So let's just wipe that off there. There we are. Some masses of texture just from a little bit of modelling paste, light, and then colour of paint, and then the laser gel on top of the antique laser on top of there. There we are. Let's just pop that onto the floor. And that brown brush can go into there. Still going to need a bit more of a dry. We're getting there, ladies. We are getting there. I might have to show you a picture on my phone from when it's finished. There we are. Let's just give this all dry. So it's not completely dry, is this? And I would, wherever preferable, I would say that you're better off letting things like this dry naturally, rather than doing what I'm doing, which is force dry. You see a huge, great big crack there. And there are a whole bunch of smaller ones up here. I don't want to bubble this medium, though. Let's just give this all a try. I think most of it will be okay. Because I want to add stuff into the cracks I've made. I need this to be dry on at least for doing. I'm going to have to be careful of that area, because that is the same area where I did not let the primer dry. Right, okay. Let's just give this a dry. I quite like to dry brush some of these pieces. That is great. Okay. So we have a colour called Nimbus, which is a very, very, very beautiful, very soft green. Let's just use a nice firm brush and pop that into there, and then offload most of it. You've seen me doing this many times before. And let's just add just some extra. That was a bit heavy-handed, but that's okay. We'll add just a bit more texture onto here. Just adding another layer of colour. And with the dry brushing, you're definitely better off by going back and forth several times rather than trying to add it all in one go. There we are. So I've got next to nothing now on my brush, but it's helping to bring out all of those layers onto. They're all built into the mould, so it makes sense to show them all off, doesn't it? There we are. There we are. So we've added low lights, we've added highlights, there we are. Come back. There we are. Right, Mr. Pufferfish. There we are. Cool. So let's just pop that into there. Right. So we've got a nice lid. Let's just stuff that out of the way for the moment. And then let us pick up another lasso, because the dark will show on them, but not as well as the paler ones. So this is the Wall Lasso Antique in the colour Patina Green. I know that is open, so let's just do that. So we'll have some of that and some of that, and clean the mitts. So that is the blue brush. So I'm just going to say this one, the dark one will be difficult to see. I know it will, because we're going dark on dark. Okay, and then we can blend them across as we go. I don't particularly want to contaminate my pots for obvious reasons, so I'm squashing this into the holes. Right, and then let's just wipe this off. So you think it's a mess, but actually when I wipe it down, we'll need to get a clean one. You can now see all of that crackle appearing, and the colour through the crackle has come from the from the alcohol inks. Let me just get a clean one of those. So polish off that surface. You can see all of that beautiful crackle. It just is scrummy, ummy. So let's just add some of that. We're going to mix up our colours of our crackle in the same way as you quite often see me working when I'm painting, don't you? I mix things up as I go. There we are. Right, hopefully. There we are. Clean area of that. I can see that I've now got more colour variation. So this mess, there we are, just with a little wipe. Just is so effective. Let me get the worst of that off and then turn that inside out. This is a wet wipe, so you can see that this is now wipeable quite happily. I don't know if Facebook's being a pain. I'm no longer seeing any comments changing, so I never quite know whether that's because I bored you all senseless or whether it is actually just Facebook that has decided to. So there we are. So we now have that beautiful crackle highlighted with those. Lid these two pieces. Over here and over here. Oh, she says, go on. Let's just lid the pot. And this is when it might require me to be a bit of contortionist. Because that's what you need to be when you're doing things like this. Oops, she says, let's pop that in there. Let's just have a clear down of that mess. Wipe that all up. There we are. Okie dokie. So we have our beautiful crackled pot with the colour from the alcohol inks in the background. Oh dear, let me just... yeah, look at them. They're filthy. How people manage to keep their hands alive, clean when they're doing this? Well, they put gloves on, don't they? And then just peel the gloves off. But the gloves would end up filthy, and I'd end up with having to put about, swap the gloves 5 times through the live. I suppose it's an option. I suppose it's an option. There we are. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. There we are. It's not always that things... Now then, what do we require? So, this will be a challenge. Let's pop that there. Thank you. But I have one that I have pre-done. Oh, minus molds to show you what the effect is like. Okie dokie. So we're going to take our fish. These could be shells. You could use whatever you want. And we're going to clear off the excess. And we're going to pop that onto there. And from an expedience point of view, we're going to see if we can then get it to glue in place with a little bit of heat. And we are going to lift off the worst of that glue, the heavy body gel that I've squidged out the side, okay, because it will dry opaque. So that is going to go onto there. Okay. So let's turn that one round, and he's going to go onto there. Put that over so we've got the whole thing covered. There we are. I'm just going to hold these down whilst the glue grabs. Without burning the fingers too much, because I don't really wish to burn my fingers. Thanking you. There we are. So I just need to hold that, squash down, take off that extra glue, as the case may be. And patience is what is required for this, not necessarily doing it on a live. There we are. I'll squash that down so he's held nicely. Into place. There we are. Let's just make sure that this one is equally sat down quite nicely. And hold him into place. Oh, she says, and hold him into place and then move him every which way. Oh, there we are. That was not quite the intention. But hey ho. There we are. There we are. Eeny meeny. So he's going that way. So he's going that way. There we are. And you'll never make two of these identical, because obviously all of the layers are independent. So let's pop that. Let's put that there. And give that one a little bit of a blast. And we'll take off the excess. So just a wet paintbrush, lift it off, put it out of the way. If you're using the glossy gel, then it won't matter. So you'll get a blob of glossiness, but that's okay. Let's just pop that one up there, and then we'll see if we want to pop the Mr. Puffer on or not. And there's way too much glue on there, so let's just pop that over there for the moment. There we are. He can go up there. I'm just holding some of the others down in place while I... Yeah, she says it's getting hot. And that big white blob will eventually go clear. he needs holding down. Let me just attach them nicely. There we are. So we now have, you can see what I mean by that, you can see the inside. So that from the inside, they just look like they're shadows. So there we are. And do I want to add Mr. Puffer? Mr. Puffer is facing that way. In fact, I'm going to leave Mr. Puffer off because I think there's enough on there. So let me lid that. Now at this stage, if you wanted, you could put some gel medium around the bottom and then some natural shells. So let me just pop that over there. We have a tray, and I'm actually going to pick up the glossy gel for doing this, so it looks like there are shells at the bottom of the ocean. So there we are. I'm just going to pop an irregular layer. We'll spread it out. We don't need great big thick globs of it, but as I say, this is going to be will be dry as glossy anyway, so and clear. That's why one of the reasons why I've picked this up. Let's just add, doesn't have to be a flat there. There we are. So that can go there. Right, pop that onto there. Okay. So these are literally just natural shells. Which we can add into here. There's some bits of faux glass in here as well. Add a bit of sparkle, and that's fine. Little bits of stones from a florist as well lurking, where they've come off a different, where I've had them out for a different project. Don't want them on the bottom for obvious reasons, because then the pot won't stand straight. There we are. And these will fall because it's inevitable. There we are. Take those off the bottom of there. Let me just go and grab a little bit of glitter. Oh look, I know, glitter. Who would have thought? Put those back into that box. There we are, because I can fish those bits out. And so this is Stamperia glass glitter. That is turquoise. That is starting blue. There we are. I'll pop that over there. Lifted this up. There we are. So let's put that on the floor. Let's put that on the floor. let's cover that. Let's just have a tidy down. Put that out of the way. Pop the lid on that. So we have our little glass with our fish who are swimming around, with our shells at the bottom, because this one isn't completely dry. This is the one I did to trial to see if it was going to work. So this is just a set of string lights, but you can see the lights through, which is why I wanted to use the transparent gel. You pop tea lights into there, little candles. You can see how pretty that effect is. If I take that out, this is a candle that's less effective because there's an extra layer of wax. In the dark, that shows through. But it's just really super simple. You can pop the lid on. There we are. Thank you, Sarah. So I will let this one dry properly. I will finish the lid so that I have two of them, because why not? And I will post them on social media at some stage. So thank you everyone for watching. I know what I'm going to do before I forget and walk out of the craft room. I'm going to turn that off. Thank you. So, plain glass jar, media inks to colour, then transparent cracking gel, and then I've filled the whole, the gaps with the lasers, and then we've just added some natural shells and some sparkle and our fish. So, once that is properly dry, I can photograph it. At the moment, if I try and show you it in all detail, I think that will be a bit of a problem. So there we are. So that's what it looks like. I'm glad you like it. It's been a fun project to make, I have to say. I really have enjoyed it. I like it when a plan in my head comes together. It's always helpful. So please, ladies, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you online on Friday evening. Bye-bye for now.